It's Thursday, the 26th of February 2026. The Ukrainian-Russian war has been going on, depends where you begin. So let's say 2014, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea. 2022, the full invasion began, and being 2026, you can say that it's been going on for 12 years. The EU are getting increasingly aggressive with their rhetoric. It's probably a defensive thing. Attack is the best form of defense, that kind of strategy. I don't think it's working. Instead of deterring the Russians, Russian rhetoric is also getting increasingly aggressive. Of course, we don't really know the true impact behind the scenes, because what we hear in the media is the leaders and politicians speaking to their constituents. So the danger is conflict, obviously, a war. Nobody is saying, like the Second World War, it'll be over by Christmas. Both sides pretty much agree that it's a war of attrition for an indefinite period of time. So far, but we have to conclude that Russia has annexed Crimea and is in control of four-ish, slightly more, around about administrative regions that will not be returned. That seems to be the general consensus. Basically, Russia controls about a fifth of Ukraine. And we also need to understand that Ukraine is in a bit of a precarious position, because should Russia decide to take Odessa and blocks access to the Black Sea, then Ukraine will be landlocked. And also Russia has various routes through which it can attack Ukraine. And of course, it's a bigger question than Europe going to war. It would be NATO going to war. And the impact of that is unknown. For example, would all countries within NATO actually go to war? Would those agreements stand? And just as an example, should Turkey not want to go to war against Russia as part of NATO, what impact would that then have on the wider Middle East? And of course, we can't ignore the fact that Ukraine still needs American assistance to even have a chance. Intelligence, military kit, and so on. Now, there are two potential causes behind Russia's invasion. The first is that Putin needs the war, and the second is that Russia sees the expansion of NATO eastwards up to its borders as a national security threat. And we may also want to consider something which is not being openly said, and that is that the Europeans would like to keep the Russians on the other side of the Ukrainian border. The Russians would like to keep the Europeans on the other side of the Ukrainian border. And so Ukraine has become the de facto battleground. A proxy war is taking place there. And both sides would like to continue seeing the war carried out there, because neither side wants the other at its own borders. Just to be clear, neither Europe and I believe most Russians don't want to see the war continue, but if it does, in its present state, perhaps both sides want it to stay in Ukraine. Now, I don't know what the answer to the first potential reason for this, the Russian invasion, is that Putin needs the war. I don't know how to solve that problem. To expand a bit, the idea that Putin needs the war to survive. But if the reason is the second, that Russia sees NATO's expansion up to its borders as a national security threat, which implies that this would be an issue even if Putin wasn't in power. Then perhaps what needs to be considered are security guarantees for Russia. Presently, the narrative is around security guarantees for Ukraine, for it to accept compromises. But it may need to be security guarantees for Russia. And it should be remembered that an agreement is possible. If we go back to the early 1990s, post the breakup of the USSR, the thinking was that Western Europe and the USA could help Eastern Europe and Russia prosper, and that would remove the threat of war. And Eastern Europe has prospered, but something has happened that has prevented Russia from prospering. Now, lots of things have happened. Perhaps one of them was the threat of a united Europe. I know this sounds crazy at this point in time, but the threat of a wealthy Europe and a wealthy Russia united, that would have formed, been a threat to the other global powers. And of course, the issue from Russia's point of view is how can they be sure that any guarantees given won't be revoked, rescinded, walked back, and so on. After all, as we understand it, during the negotiations for the reunification of Germany, a gentleman's agreement, I suppose, was given that NATO would not expand eastward by 1 inch. But of course, it did expand. Russia wants NATO membership. Georgia wanted NATO membership. Russia had to invade Georgia. So from Russia's point of view, is how can they be sure the security guarantee won't be revoked? This promise that NATO wouldn't expand eastward, I'm not sure anything was written. There may have been. As I understand it, it was a gentleman's agreement. And we have to consider this in the context of past agreements having been revoked, rescinded, etc. from both sides. So the West has rescinded agreements, primarily the Americans, possibly the Europeans. The Russians have walked back from agreements too. So one of the fundamental problems is neither side trusts the other to not revoke or rescind or walk back agreements in some way, shape or form. Anyway, let's hope it ends, because as I make this video, close to 2 million lives have been lost. 1.2 million on the Russian side, 600,000 on the Ukrainian side.